The sound of music and laughter can be swallowed by a silence heavier than any scream. Rome, the year 1502. Inside the gilded halls of the Vatican, candles flickered against crystal-leafed walls, reflecting off crystal goblets brimming with spiced wine. The air was thick with the perfume of roses, a scent meant to charm, to awe, and to dominate. A wedding feast unfolded like a stage play, each detail more calculated than the last. Roasted peacocks glistened as if dusted with sunlight. Servants whispered instructions and corridors lined with tapestries depicting battles and saints. And nobles paraded their status like peacocks of flesh and finery. But this was not a celebration of love. It was a negotiation of power, a transaction sealed not on parchment, but on the body of a young woman. She was Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, sister of Cesare Borgia, whose ambition was said to run rivers red with blood. Only 22 years old, yet a veteran of survival, in a court where alliances were forged and lives ended with equal precision. The Borgias were newcomers, but dangerous ones. Their name carried wealth and fear. Poison and scandal rode alongside them like loyal hounds. Allies were purchased, rivals disposed of, and family was currency. For Lucrezia, marriage was never love, it was strategy. And tonight, her body itself would be transformed into a ledger. Her intimacy would become proof, her humiliation a weapon of politics. Across the hall, Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, sat poised beside her. His family was ancient, proud, steeped in tradition. They did not trust the Borgias, not their promises, not their stories, not their daughters. The wedding, performed under gilded arches and papal authority, was not enough. Signatures and vows could be erased, ink faded, words could be questioned. What they demanded was certainty, proof. Rumors haunted Lucrezia's past marriages. Her first husband, Giovanni, had been cast aside under charges of impotence, likely fabricated to free her for the next alliance. Her second, Alonso of Aragon, had been murdered on Vatican steps, his blood staining the very stones where power and violence intertwined. Now, the Este family would not risk whispers, rumors that could question potency or fertility. Tonight, the evidence had to be undeniable. When the feast concluded, poets exhausted their verses and dancers twirled their last steps. Lucrezia and Alfonso were led, not to a private chamber, but to a stage. Curtains pulled back just enough to reveal the couple to selected witnesses, papal clerics, Este envoys, notaries. Eyes sharp, pens ready, breathing measured. Every movement would be recorded, every sound noted, every proof documented. Lucrezia, in silk and vulnerability, became the living guarantee of an alliance. Her breaths, her subtle motions, her every reaction, an inked contract with flesh and blood. Alfonso's pride was shackled, forced to demonstrate potency under observation. Lucrezia, who had endured annulments, scandal, and the murders of men she once loved, had her humanity stripped bare, reduced to evidence. And yet, history whispers only in shadows about what followed. It did not happen once. It did not happen twice. It happened 3 times. The first, to erase doubt. The second, to silence whispers. The third, to seal the alliance beyond challenge. 3 times, while they all watched. The grotesque theater of power and flesh had begun.
The couple was led to the stage, not a private chamber, but a theater.
papacy's most trusted clerics, este envoys, and notaries stood in solemn silence. Faces half turned, eyes like blades, pens poised to record every detail. Every breath Lucretia drew was observed. Every subtle movement was cataloged. Every hint of hesitation noted. The candlelight danced across silk and skin, casting shadows that seemed almost alive. Lucretia's body, the vessel of her family's power, became proof, undeniable proof. Alfonso's pride, like a bird trapped in a gilded cage, struggled against the demands of duty. He had to demonstrate potency. He had to silence doubts. Lucretia, who had survived annulments, scandal, and the murders of men she loved, was forced to confront the cruelest lesson of her life. Humanity is expendable in the theater of power. And then it began. The first act, to erase doubt. The witnesses recorded every sign of fertility, every motion that proved consummation. Silence was punctuated only by the crackle of torches, the rustle of silk, the subtle sighs of tension. The second act, to silence whispers. The room felt suffocating. Every inhale, every glance, every breath, a contract, a living document of obedience, of proof. Lucretia's dignity was laid bare before the eyes of men whose pens would carry her story across Italy. And then the third act, to seal the alliance beyond challenge. 3 times, while they all watched, every motion notarized, every gasp recorded, every detail remembered. It is here, in the shadows of humiliation, that Lucretia discovered a cruel paradox. Degradation can be transformed into power. The whispers began immediately. Messengers carried the tale to Ferrara. Nobles in Venice and Florence repeated it over wine. Clerics in Rome spoke in veiled murmurs about the theater of flesh staged under papal blessing. What was meant as proof became legend. What was meant to destroy her forged legitimacy. Alfonso de Este had proven himself potent. Lucretia was fertile. No annulment could undo this bond. The grotesque ceremony had stripped her dignity, but also armed her with invincible legitimacy. This was the paradox of Renaissance power. The same world that weaponized shame could forge strength from it. And in Ferrara, Lucretia would learn to wield it. The first night of Ferrara was not a wedding. It was political theater staged with flesh. A grotesque contract signed under candlelight. But as the weeks passed, the court's whispers grew cruel. Women snickered behind fans. Men laughed, embellishing details over wine. Even clerics who had witnessed the ordeal hinted at its darkness in careful, veiled gossip. Most women would have been imprisoned by infamy. Lucretia understood its secret. Once shame is exposed, it loses power. What was meant to destroy her freed her instead. Strategy was subtle. She did not deny the whispers. She allowed them to swirl. And in that swirl, she built the narrative she wanted. She dazzled the Ferrara court with charm, wit, and an elegance that disarmed even her harshest critics. Slowly, the whispers lost their sting. She became not a victim, but a woman who carried humiliation as composure. And in politics, composure is power. Ferrara welcomed her not as the daughter of a scandal, but as a duchess who had survived the fires of Rome. The whispers followed her like shadows. But shadows can be outrun and sometimes turned into armor. She walked among the streets, unseen and observing. Children curtsied, mothers whispered her name in hushed tones. Her presence was quiet, yet commanded respect. The court, initially skeptical, began to see her differently. Those who expected scandal were met with poise. Those who expected submission found a mind calculating, discerning, and unyielding. She did not erase her past. She repurposed it. Every insult, every murmur of scandal became a lesson in resilience. Every challenge, a step toward authority. What was meant to cage her became the foundation of her throne. Lucrezia's intelligence became her shield, her charm a weapon, and her composure the armor that few could pierce. Salons were her new stage. She gathered poets, philosophers, scholars, and musicians under her patronage. Discussions of Plato and Aristotle filled the halls. Recitations of Ariosto echoed through chambers, and composers played music that seemed to breathe with the pulse of Ferrara itself. Ferrara began to speak her name with a different tone. She was no longer the scandalous Borgia bride. She was La Buona Duchessa, the good duchess. Power, however, is never granted freely. Lucrezia knew the rules of Renaissance politics. She had witnessed her brother Caesar carve Italy with armies and assassinations. She had seen her father wield marriage alliances like daggers. Survival depended not only on appearances, but on control of the narrative. Letters, negotiations, subtle interventions, each step a move on the chessboard. Her enemies believed they were shaping her story, but she was shaping theirs. Lucrezia's court became a reflection of her mind, order, beauty, intellect, influence. Not brutality like Rome, but a subtler, more insidious power. And in this power, she finally found freedom. Freedom not of the body, her marriage had demanded proof, but freedom of the mind, of the narrative. The whispers that once sought to destroy her were now pools she wielded with precision. Even the Este family, who had demanded proof of potency and fertility, could not deny her influence. They had received certainty that night in Rome, but in Ferrara, they received a duchess who could command respect and loyalty effortlessly. History, as it often does, remembers the spectacle, the 3 acts, the whispered humiliation, the scandal. But those who look closer see the transformation, a woman weaponized by her family, a daughter, a sister, a pawn, turned her theater of degradation into a theater of authority. In Renaissance Italy, power could be written in blood, contracts, and whispers. Lucrezia wrote it in patience, composure, and intellect. She was not merely a survivor. She was a strategist, a duchess who had endured humiliation, scandal, and loss, and emerged unbroken, respected, and feared in her own right. And so, the lesson of that first night, 3 acts witnessed by all, was clear. Even when stripped of dignity, even when reduced to proof, a woman with resilience can forge power from the ashes of shame. Lucrezia Borgia, the bride who became a duchess, the scandal that became authority, the shadow of Rome that illuminated Ferrara.